Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. It is the 18th of December already, and as always, we encourage you to visit our website at arh.noaa.gov. By going to the statewide view, you can simply click on your community and get your local weather information as well as observations, satellite views, and in many cases, a look at the radar as well. You can go to weather.gov and head to Anchorage or Juneau or Fairbanks fairly easily in that direction. Call the Weather Info line at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office on Twitter, on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska, and we love to get your snow reports and pictures there. Even temperature reports are fun too, especially if you're Katy out around Tok and Eagle and down toward Northway. YouTube, of course, NWS Anchorage, a great place to get your mid-afternoon update there with a small weather brief for the entire state, about 3:30 to 4 o'clock or so. And following this broadcast on AKWX TV on the channel on YouTube there, youtube.com, brought to you by this station at Alaska Public. You can get the entire broadcast of Alaska weather following the show. Here's a look at the hazardous weather as we see it across southeastern Alaska tonight. Winter storm warnings are posted for a great many areas. It looks like many sections there around southeast will be dealing with accumulating snow, a lot of which will begin in earnest after midnight tonight. And that extends all the way from the northern Gulf into the middle parts of southeast. In some cases there, again, we're talking about 7 to 11 inches of snow. So plan for some changes there with another surge of moisture running into a tremendous amount of cold air that's found its way across the north and eastern Gulf. In some cases that may be combined with some stronger wind gusts, and we'll talk about that coming up with your marine forecast so you get a better local view of what's going on in your area. But once again, in southeast, be prepared for more snow with winter storm warnings and in some cases some advisories there, including the Tye Inlet and Klondike Highway areas there. One thing, if you haven't checked this out recently, especially if you're in southeast, I'm talking to you, weather.gov/Juneau. Click on that main page there, and at the top there's been a great, really handy link that talks about snow loading. So if you want to calculate your snow load for your roof, especially in southeast, it'll work for anywhere, but especially in southeast where that heavier, wetter snow is a little more common, be sure and check that out there, written by the folks down there at the Juneau National Weather Service office. All right, looking at the south central forecast now, you're checking out winter weather advisories. This has expired now for the upper Tanana Valley. So you don't have to worry about this anymore. But down around the lower Yukon Valley, we're still looking at a winter weather advisory there for accumulating snow. That'll go through the evening and overnight hours there. Another total of about 2 to 5 inches expected there. For the Susitna Valley, also for the western parts of the Kenai Peninsula, winter weather advisories for snow and blowing snow. We're expecting about 5 to 10 inches around the Susitna Valley there, along with some stronger wind gusts, some of those winds that could create some poor visibility. We have a blizzard warning out for the western parts of Prince William Sound, mainly north of Moose Pass, and that's where we expect some of the strongest winds and heavier snow. We're looking at about 8 to 14 inches of snow possible in that region in the western Prince William Sound area, and some of the gusts could reach around 50 miles per hour. So again, that will drop visibility in those areas. Combined with the falling snow and snow on the ground, blizzard conditions then are expected. As you look up toward Anchorage, again in the Susitna Valley, totals around 4 to 7 inches in the Anchorage area, including the hillside, and the Kenai area about 5 to 10 inches there for the western parts of the Kenai Peninsula, and the Susitna Valley once again about 5 to 10 inches of snow. So a lot of folks in South Central are going to be dealing with some of that heavier snow, at least during the overnight hours and into early morning. Most of these advisories and warnings, including blizzard warning, go until about 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So make sure you stay tuned to whatever your favorite weather information getting place is. Make sure you're tuned into that early in the morning to see if some of these advisories may have been extended or perhaps adapted somewhat to the present situation as we see it, and see it changing into the afternoon. Here's a look at the Bering Sea in the North Pacific, and you can see this giant swirl of moisture here across the southern Bering Sea and the giant plume of moisture attached to it. We have a very vigorous trough stretched out all the way across the North Pacific, and if you watch carefully, watch one more time, look at the clouds and the moisture kind of dropping south to fill that in. That is a tremendous amount of cold over at Anadyr, as you'll see here in a few minutes. Temperatures there well below 20 below this afternoon. So there's a lot of cold air working its way down the Bering, and all this moisture is running up and over it. And in this case, it's cold enough that we're all dealing with snow at this point, except in Southwest where it's starting to snow. A lot of this, though, will quickly turn back over to rain. On Alaska today, 50 degrees, a great warm and windy day across the central and eastern Aleutians as the low pressure system went north and east of Adak. So we got a strong southerly flow moving out of the North Pacific there, and strong enough again to push those temperatures in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees across the central Aleutians. Well, all this moisture is moving over cold air that is not getting punched in with surface winds from the south just yet. So all this moisture working over the cold, that's going to create snow for most areas in southeast and south central. Southwest, you're going to see a little bit of a change. In the Aleutians right now, we're seeing rain, I believe, out around Unalaska this afternoon. So an awful lot going on. Now for the interior, you can see some of the moisture is already making its way north of the Alaska Range by late afternoon, but many areas still under the effects of very cold and intense high pressure. Places like Dawson, Whitehorse, Northway, Eagle, all well below zero, anywhere from 10, 20, maybe even 40 below in some cases in the central Yukon under that high. So just impressive cold, and it's going to take a little while to warm that up and saturate it enough to create a whole lot of snow. But moisture is coming your way, and there probably will be some snow there across the central and eastern interior as we go through the course of the rest of the week. There's our friend the high out there across the central Yukon. As the weather pattern changes, you're not going to be tapped into that if you're into the interior as much. Now, of course, it's wintertime, so it's very hard to shake that off, of course. But look at this storm out here. Rough, tough, and hard to bluff at 970 millibars, working its way in from the south and west into southwestern Alaska with periods of snow still falling across the Bristol Bay region. Again, a winter weather advisory there. And for Kodiak, looking at some snow accumulations. Frontal boundary stalled across southeast. Not a whole lot of wet weather during most of the day today, but that's going to change fairly quickly as we head into tonight. Watch the odd setup of this low, though. It is working its way across the southern periphery of the high. Imagine this is just a big block. All it wants to do is keep weather patterns from moving up into it. Well, the low is trying to cut its way into the southern edge of this, pushing moisture into that cold, and of course that's going to create some possibilities for some heavier snow across southwest, south central, Prince William Sound, and into the north and eastern Gulf Coast as we go into tonight. Some areas of snow along the Brooks Range and the Norton Sound, north of the Yukon as well, with high pressure sitting across the Arctic coast. And as we go into Thursday, low pressure is working its way very close to Yakutat, a included front working right up against southeast. There's going to be some stronger wind rotating on the eastern side and along this front all the way into Prince William Sound, so watch for turbulence here if you're trying to fly through this, and of course you're rated for instrument flight rule. It looks like there's going to be a considerable amount of precipitation working through southeast and south central during the day, and then another slug of warm air moves into the southern Bering Sea with snow showers across the lower Yukon and around St. Lawrence Island and the Pribilofs. High pressure still trying to lock down the interior and the North Slope with cold, dry air. But it looks like that's slowly going to work its way into the north there, with clouds moving north of the Yukon through Friday. Areas of blowing snow possible across the west coast into Kotzebue Sound. And here's that warm air making another return into Bristol Bay, bringing a chance for rain across the eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Pen, and areas of snow still possible across the Kenai. Probably not as far north as Anchorage and the Mat-Su valleys, but it's still falling across southeast, and there should be some pockets of rain and warmth across the extreme southern parts of southeast. That's a quick peek at what's going on through the rest of the week. Look at temperatures here. Teens, 20s, maybe even a few 30s there sneaking into southeast. Still cold in the north, though. Haines and Skagway, single-digit territory today. 20 in Yakutat, teens and 20s for Prince William Sound, Anchorage and Palmer, Wasilla, all starting out well below zero this morning, up to 3 in Anchorage by the end of the day. 20s and 30s around the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. That's that warm air working its way northward with the snow. 34 in Kodiak. Around Healy and Greeley, temperatures very close to, if not well below zero. Fairbanks was 14 below. Northway and Eagle, pretty cold stuff. Northway only 36 below today. That's a little bit better than yesterday. Fort Yukon 11 below. The Arctic coast anywhere from 15 to about 25 below. Kaktovik only 8 below. Kotzebue Sound 0 to 4 above in some cases. Kivalina though 3 below. Nome is showing 3 above. Norton Sound and Unalakleet around the low 20s for most places there. Bethel was 15, Cape Newingham 29 degrees, 32 in King Salmon, above freezing in the Pribilofs, and then look at Dutch Harbor, 50 degrees. Wow, that's some heat. And around the Alaska Peninsula, 30s and 40s there. Adak and Aka both above the 40-degree mark, 36 and colder though in Shemya. Overnight low temperatures well below zero, anywhere from the 20s to 30s below. It looks like Fairbanks 13 below, the YK Delta in the teens and 20s there, so things are still warming up there overnight. 30s and 40s across the southwest and AK Penn, 32 in Kodiak, teens and 20s for southeast. South Central still single digits, but watch what happens tomorrow. With warm, wet air moving in, we're back into the 20s. Not quite at freezing, but it does show some signs of warming up. Anywhere from about 3 below in Fairbanks to the teens and 20s below across the northern parts of the interior, the Arctic coast, anywhere from 5 to 15 below, including Kaktovik, 9 below, and about 14 below around Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, and areas around Kuparuk. Southeast looking at temps in the low to mid 30s as wet air and wind is moving in there. Look for IFR conditions across some of the higher terrain and also across the central parts of the Aleutian chain, most areas. So MVFR with some improvement during the day. Here's a look at your pass conditions now. And as you'll notice around Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions through most of the day. Things should be pretty much okay up there, but just awfully cold. IFR conditions changing over to MVFR conditions all the way around the Alaska range for Windy Pass, Isabel Pass, some improvement during the day in Mentasta Pass. Tanita Pass, we expect to see marginal flight restrictions, and Portage Pass trending over toward MVFR perhaps by day's end. Of course, things should be lowering and worsening as far as visibility goes for Chilkoot and White Pass. The surface freezing line running right over Bristol Bay and hugging the Gulf Coast all the way around the Horn, and you can see that warm and wet air moving up over the Gulf. Some freezing levels as high as 10,000 feet out over the Gulf, but for all intents and purposes over Bristol Bay, it's as low as 2,000 feet and perhaps as high as 6,000 feet. Everywhere else will be well below freezing through the entire period. Icing potential anywhere from 4 to about 14,000 feet is where we expect the worst of it there. Some of that reaching occasional to widespread moderate across northern parts of southeast and the northern Gulf Coast and the Kenai Penn. Most other areas will only flirt with light to isolated moderate icing potential, with the interior pretty much in the clear at this point. We're changing the weather pattern from a ridge of high pressure that's brought in some substantial cold across a large part of the interior and the deep south parts of Alaska to more of a stronger trough pattern that's going to put us into more of an active phase of our weather experience for the next 5 to 7 days. We also have a trough across the Pacific Northwest guiding a lot of this weather quickly back into the lower 48. So watch what happens at 9,000 feet. We've got this stronger southwesterly flow pushing weather into southeast. Another impulse moving across the Seward Peninsula, and here's our current storm across the central Aleutians. All this again is moving from southwest to northeast, so it's focusing a lot of that warm air across southwestern Alaska, the Alaska Penn, and the central and eastern Aleutians, and guiding a lot of that moisture right into southeast. So at 3,000 feet we see some stronger winds here between about 40 and 65 knots. Lighter flow back behind that initial surge, and then more of an easterly continental flow coming out of the Yukon between 10 and about 20 knots. And when you put it together and look at the turbulence chart, no surprise then with this weather pattern in the front parked right across the northern and eastern Gulf, we're going to have some pretty bumpy weather there all the way from Prince William Sound and the Cook Inlet below 4,000 feet all the way into southeastern Alaska. Some of that could reach isolated severe, so be extra careful if you're flying around southeast and the northern Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula tomorrow, even Kodiak Island. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
When looking back at American fighter planes of World War II, an impressive record of aerial victories stands out. This is especially true in the later stages of the war, when American air superiority dominated both the Pacific and European combat theaters. But surprisingly, this was not the case in the beginning stages of the war. Early American fighters could not always match the speed and maneuverability of the enemy aircraft that they were facing. To help find a way to improve the aircraft American pilots were flying, U.S. military planners turned to NASA's predecessor, NACA, which they hoped could find a way to help the United States gain air superiority over World War II's battlefields. On the eve of World War II, with the prospect of war looming in the United States, military planners began an exhaustive look at the preparedness and equipment that it would use to fight a war. One area where the United States had fallen noticeably behind to its future enemies was in aircraft. Many of the aircraft that U.S. pilots were flying were much slower and less maneuverable than the aircraft that they would soon be facing in combat. With this knowledge in hand, a concerted effort was made by the U.S. government to find ways to quickly improve the American aircraft situation. Since NASA's predecessor, NACA, or the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, was the preeminent aeronautics lab in the country, a large part of this examination fell to them. NACA researchers knew that they could improve an aircraft's performance by simply reducing the amount of drag the aircraft experienced. This was called drag cleanup. The Navy's XF-2A Brewster Buffalo was the first of many military aircraft tested by NACA in an effort to improve performance. Researchers at the NACA Langley Research Center took only 5 days to determine several key areas in which the Buffalo could be improved. To the untrained eye, the Buffalo appeared aerodynamically clean. However, the wind tunnel information showed a very different picture. Many parts, like the gun sights, the engine cowling, and landing gear on the Buffalo protruded into the slipstream, causing increased drag which slowed the aircraft tremendously. The researchers at NACA modified these problem areas, which increased the Buffalo's speed by an impressive 10%. Such a performance improvement without raising engine power or reducing fuel efficiency immediately caught the eye of many aircraft designers. Extra speed for a fighter plane, even as little as 15 miles per hour, could determine who won or lost in an aerial dogfight. When Langley researchers streamlined the U.S. Navy's F-4F Wildcat, it was able to fly a full 45 miles per hour faster. The F-4F successor, the F-6F Hellcat, was also streamlined, making it faster and more maneuverable, able to reach a maximum speed of 375 miles per hour. This extra speed proved valuable in combat, allowing Hellcat pilots to destroy nearly 5,000 enemy planes in aerial engagements. NACA Langley proved a key stopping point for dozens of aircraft on their way to combat duty in World War II. During 1 month alone in July 1944, 36 U.S. Army and Navy planes were evaluated in detailed studies of stability, control, and performance. NACA Langley tested 137 different airplane types between 1941 and 1945, either in wind tunnels or in flight. While NACA's pioneering drag cleanup work helped save the lives of many American pilots during World War II, it also shortened the war considerably and saved the lives of countless others around the world.
During the World War II era, NACA researchers also worked on a series of wing designs called the Low Drag Series. These wing designs were so successful in improving aircraft performance that they are still being used by airplane designers today. Coming up, we find out how new satellites may help scientists better understand the Earth's atmosphere. But first, did you know that Charles Lindbergh shot down a Japanese fighter in World War II? Although Lindbergh was not in the military, he was secretly asked to teach American pilots how to increase the range of their P-38 Lightnings. During a training mission on July 28, 1944, Lindbergh encountered a Japanese Sonya aircraft. As the Sonya turned to attack, Lindbergh fired a short burst, sending the Sonya down in flames.
Understanding the Earth's atmosphere can be very difficult. A mixture of global weather patterns, greenhouse gases, and airborne particles can make the overall picture for scientists very confusing. To help provide a better picture of how all of these variables affect the Earth's atmosphere, NASA researchers are developing new atmospheric satellite systems. These new systems will not only work to provide a better understanding of the Earth's atmosphere, but will lead to better prediction models. Stephanie Nevin finds out more.
In recent years, researchers have seen an alarming warming trend in the global climate. Reports of increasing temperatures, thinning glaciers, and rising sea levels have led to widespread speculation that global warming is being caused by greenhouse gases that result from man's activities. Climate models that predict the Earth's future climate patterns indicate that global warming could continue to increase if the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere continues to rise. Even though these climate models are powerful tools in predicting future global climate, a more detailed understanding of clouds and aerosols could lead to more accurate climate prediction models. Researchers may be able to determine why the climate is warming, if it is being affected by greenhouse gases, and what we can do to change it. That is why researchers at NASA are preparing 6 innovative satellite systems, which, when launched, will provide key information about the Earth's atmosphere. 2 of these satellites, Calypso and CloudSat, will focus primarily on aerosols and cloud structures, providing much more information about how clouds and aerosols interact with each other and how they're affecting the atmosphere's radiation balance. I spoke with Lamont Poole at NASA Langley Research Center to find out more.
It's important to study clouds and airborne particles, which we call aerosols, because both of them have significant effects on the Earth's climate, just like greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide. But unlike greenhouse gases, which warm the planet, airborne particles and clouds can either have a warming effect or a cooling effect, depending on their type and their altitude. Because of these complicating factors, it's very difficult to represent cloud and aerosol processes accurately in climate models that are used to forecast the climate in the future. So the data that we will be collecting from CloudSat and Calypso will provide a much more accurate picture of cloud and aerosol processes.
So what are the differences between the Calypso and CloudSat satellites?
They're going to be launched on the same rocket, and when they get to altitude, they will separate into different but very closely matched orbits. In fact, as Calypso and CloudSat orbit the Earth, they will be within 10 to 15 seconds of each other in their orbit. CloudSat and Calypso are going to be flying as part of a formation of satellites that's called the Afternoon Constellation, or the A-Train for short.
The A-Train will actually consist of 6 separate satellites flying in close proximity to one another. Once in orbit, each satellite will cross the equator within minutes of one another, taking specific atmospheric measurements. Although each satellite has a unique mission, the data retrieved will be combined together, providing detailed observations about the condition of Earth and assisting scientists with making predictions related to climate change. By combining information from the different satellites, scientists will be able to gain much more information about the condition of the planet than they could from any single mission alone, greatly improving prediction capabilities. Once these systems are in place, what do you hope the outcome will be?
Our ultimate goal is to provide accurate scientific information to decision makers and governments worldwide so that informed and balanced decisions on how to mitigate or adapt to climate change can be made. And NASA is going to play a very crucial role in this process because of our capabilities in developing and flying new technologies such as Calypso and CloudSat.
NASA researchers are not only studying the Earth's atmosphere from space, but are also making airborne measurements by using specially adapted aircraft.
That's really interesting stuff, and in just a few weeks we'll have some more updated information from our friends at UAF and the GINA program that's doing a lot of really interesting work with satellites over Alaska. For Southeast, we're talking about wind and a front moving closer to the coast. A stronger south and southeasterly flow around 40 to 45 knots all the way up to Yakutat, combined with snow and fog and wind. Should be a great day offshore. Anywhere from 12 to 15-foot seas are expected along the eastern coast. Higher gusts in the inner channels as well. Seas anywhere from 4 to 8 feet. A northerly flow through the Lynn Canal, more of a south and southeasterly flow for the central and southern parts of the inner channels. And you can see the shift taking place on Friday. At least the winds are settling down a little bit across the coastal areas. 10 to 15, maybe even 20-knot winds there west of Craig. And north and northwesterly flows coming down the inner channels between 10 and 25 knots, with seas diminishing but still running around 4 to 5 feet in some of the higher areas. For south central, you'll notice a northeasterly flow coming across behind the low pressure system in the front that's working its way toward the coastline. Some stronger easterlies out ahead of that at 45 knots with an 18-foot sea. Southwesterlies east of Kodiak and outside of the bay, and northerlies coming down the Cook Inlet region, 20 to 25 knot winds with 10 to 16-foot seas as you approach the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. Some of that, again, will include freezing spray. It could be heavy at times. Southeasterlies coming in behind the front and wrapping into low pressure as we head into Friday. More of a lighter variable flow inside Prince William Sound, but you can still see the winds up around 10 to 20 knots, including some of the winds down around Kodiak Island at 25 knots. Northerlies continue along the Cook Inlet up to 20 knots with a 7-foot sea west of Kenai. Around the Alaska Peninsula, southwesterlies on the south side of the peninsula, looking at more of a south and southeasterly flow into Bristol Bay. 20-knot wind with 14-foot seas on Thursday, and by Friday the winds are switching around just a little bit more to the south across areas north of the peninsula there in the Bering Sea, about 25 knots with an 8-foot sea north of Cold Bay, and still looking at southerly flow on the south side there by Friday. In the Aleutians, the strongest winds will be in the west. For the east, you're looking at winds around 15 to 25 knots or so, kind of in all directions as the front is crossing over. Still a southerly flow there for Atka, Nikolsky, and Unalaska there with a 6 to 15-foot sea on either side of the island. Look out west, though, and northeasterlies anywhere from 40 to 45 knots. Those diminish somewhat as we head into Friday. North and northwesterlies coming through the central Aleutians and still holding on to that warm southerly flow across the eastern parts of the chain, with seas ranging anywhere from 8 feet between Nikolsky and Unalaska on the north side to 16 and 17 feet on the south side of the eastern sections of the chain. Across the west, deep northerly flow continues there. Freezing spray is a threat west of Nunivak Island out toward the St. Matthew Island waters and into the Pribilofs. Anywhere from 11 to 15-foot seas there in the western and central Bering, and 4 to 9-foot seas a little bit closer to the coast. So that northerly flow will not make it very warm at all, though, as we head through Friday. Winds pretty much out of the north, 25 to 35 knots. Freezing spray is still there. And out of Kuskokwim Bay, a little bit of a shift with an easterly flow coming off the land there at 25 knots with a 7-foot sea. Across the Arctic coast with northerly winds, any open areas of water will likely flash freeze, according to our sea ice program experts there. By Thursday, a light wind north and northwest, 5 to 10 knots, and across the Chukchi seacoast, 10 to 25 knots coming down the west coast, and that may stay about the same. A slight shift to more of a northeasterly direction around the Chukchi seacoast on Friday. Otherwise, light and variable winds there across the Beaufort seacoast from about 5 to perhaps 15 knots from the north and the west as we look at Friday. Here's a recap of what's going on tonight. If you are in the southern third of Alaska, your weather's about to get a lot more interesting. Unless you're in Bristol Bay, when chances are it's already very interesting. Snow and rain will be a part of your night and tomorrow, with heavier snow building in across south central and across the eastern parts of southeast Alaska, including Yakutat. Winter storm warnings and blizzard warnings are posted for parts of southeast and south central Alaska. The blizzard warning mainly north of Moose Pass, with some areas experiencing more than 8 to 14 inches of snow, with strong and driving winds in the western parts of Prince William Sound and again north of Moose Pass. You could be dealing with gusts around 50 miles per hour, dropping visibility, so watch it there. For Thursday, as a front backs into southeastern Alaska, that's going to create a better chance for some heavier snow, especially in the northern and central parts of southeast. So be prepared for changing weather and some snow to come down quickly starting tonight and tomorrow. And across southwest, snow will change over to rain around Bristol Bay, and a new storm's coming in across the southern Bering Sea as we head toward the end of the week, with another round of rain for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and the eastern Aleutians. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.